American courts hold the line for now. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's dive into it. So, our democracy is in crisis, and the courts are the last line of defense. The problem is, if Donald Trump chooses to defy court orders, there's little recourse. All enforcement departments are part of the executive branch. Federal courts then may have to ask state authorities to aid in enforcing all federal court orders. I don't know how that's going to go. But we are in a very dangerous place, and many experts have come out and have warned about it. Very seriously, George Conway warned about it in the Bulwark podcast. And, it makes you question is what's going to happen if the enforcement branch, if the executive decides that they don't want to listen to a court's order, if they defy a court's order. What it will do is it will unwind the rule of law because a court order would not be enforceable because it is being enforced. It is supposed to be enforced by the executive, but it is not being enforced. Therefore, the court order doesn't mean anything. The rule of law doesn't mean anything. And many experts have warned, and now we are seeing more and more. This morning I woke up and there was a really great article by Professor Heather Cox Richardson from Letters from an American for February 9th of 2025 that was talking precisely about this. And I want to read an excerpt from it, and I want to clarify certain things. So, as written in her essay, now MAGA Republicans are trying to neuter the judiciary after yet another federal judge stopped the Musk-Trump onslaught by temporarily blocking Musk and his team from accessing Americans' records from Treasury Department computers. MAGA Republicans attacked judges. Outrageous, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas posted, spreading the lie that the judge barred the Secretary of the Treasury from accessing the information, although in fact he temporarily barred the Secretary of the Treasury, Bessent, from granting access to others. So there's a clarification of the truth here, and we should pay attention to how MAGA leaders are framing this, because this, as experts have noted, is a precursor to Donald Trump defying a court's order, or even Elon Musk defying a court's order. Senator Mike Lee of Utah said that the decision had a feel of a judicial coup. Now, the Article 3 branch of government doesn't have a police force. So the only way it can implement a coup is by issuing an order that is not enforced by the executive branch, and then the people rising up because the executive branch won't enforce the order. There's no other sort of coup possibility here because they don't themselves have a police force. It's important to note that this language that is being used by MAGA leaders is pushing this fantasy that the judiciary is something that it is not. And here we have right-wing legal scholar Adrian Vermeule called it judicial interference with legitimate acts of state. Now, remember, there is an instant called sua sponte on its own that a court can interfere in a legal issue. But in 99.9999999% of the time, that does not happen. The way the process goes is there is a complaint filed in the clerk of the court, then notice goes out and you've been served. Then there's an answer to that. Then there's a schedule set for hearings. Then the law is, and the situation, the factual situations are heard. And then the court interprets the law to see whether it applied in accordance with the Constitution and the law in question. So it is not that something is being done by the courts. The court isn't interfering. It is somebody bringing a grievance to the court. So there's no judicial interference. The judiciary, by its nature, is a responsive body that responds to complaints that certain laws have been violated, and they are charged with the duty of determining whether those laws have been violated by interpreting the law and then interpreting the Constitution. So, interpreting the law and, when needed, interpreting the Constitution. So, judicial interference is it's nonsensical. It's absurd. Then Vice President J.D. Vance, who would take over the office of the presidency if the 78-year-old Trump can no longer perform the duties of the office, posted, "Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power." Well, he's right. Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate powers. But the judges are there to determine whether those powers are legitimate to begin with, by applying the law to the facts, determining whether or not the law is properly enforced, and then whether or not it adhered to constitutional requirements. So it is the judiciary's job to interpret the law. It is not the judiciary's job to control the executive. It is the judiciary's job to tell the executive whether or not his power is legitimate to begin with. And that is what is happening in the courts right now. So we as American citizens must be aware, and we must talk about this because it is important. What will happen if MAGA Republicans push for vilifying the courts and then Donald Trump takes the leap of not enforcing a court order and saying that, sending out the order that the Marshal Service and the FBI, they have to stand down and not listen to that order? What happens then? I mean, we all have to think about that question. Do we get onto the streets at that point? Or do the federal officers defy the president's orders? Or does the federal court system have to appeal to the state court system to ask the enforcement branches of the states to enforce the federal judiciary's orders? I don't even know if that's possible, but that's the only other solution I can think of, because other than the enforcement of the federal branch and the enforcement of the state police powers, there really are no other constitutional police powers. So we are at a place where we are at the end of the line. And, Secretary Buttigieg, former Secretary Buttigieg, made a comment on X saying, in America, decisions about what is legal and illegal are made by courts of law, not by the vice president. And yes, it's determined by the courts of law. What the law is, how it applies, whether it was applied properly or not. And the ruling must be adhered to by the executive of the federal government, which is Donald Trump at the time. And in the case of constitutional cases, everybody in the land, including federal and state officers, if you're a state actor, it applies to you. So that is our constitutional system. And that is what is at risk at the moment. And so we need to be engaged. We need to talk about it. I know it's exhausting. I know it's going on. It's now, running on 10 years that we're dealing with this Donald Trump nonsense that has only been escalating. But we need to remain vigilant. We need to remain strong with our Constitution and stand by it and stand by the rule of law. Because if there's no rule of law, then there is no accountability. There's no accountability, then we are all not in a civilized society that is run by law and order. It would dismantle the constitutional order in which we now live. So the responsibility lies with us. The responsibility lies with you. Call your representatives, call your senators, call your state officials to let them know that this is happening, that there's an undermining happening of our judiciary, and you must speak out against that. Senators must speak out against these MAGA senators that undermine a court's legitimacy. There's no avenue for that, and we should have a zero tolerance policy for doubting a court's ruling. With that said, thank you so much for listening. Please like and subscribe, and I'll talk to you soon.